He promised his 8-year-old daughter he'd be home before sunset. But moments later, an entire mountain came crashing down around him. Buried deep underground with no way out, Elias heard a voice in the darkness. And what happened next changed an entire town forever. Watch the full story to find out what happened, and follow our page for more powerful stories like this. Before we start the story, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is right now? The dry Arizona heat usually surrendered to the cool shadows of the Superstition Mountains by dusk. The evenings were often peaceful. A gentle wind moved across the desert floor, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. Travelers hurried home before darkness settled over the land, and families gathered around supper tables while the sky turned shades of orange and purple. But on one particular evening, peace vanished in an instant. Elias Hawthorne guided his wagon along the narrow tunnel road that cut through the rocky pass. At 41 years old, Elias was known throughout Arizona territory as a hard-working wagon dealer. From Phoenix to Prescott, people trusted him because he always kept his promises. If Elias Hawthorne said he would arrive on Tuesday, he arrived on Tuesday. If he promised a delivery by sunset, it was there before sunset. That evening, however, his mind was not focused on business. Inside the back of his buckboard wagon sat a small cedar box. Carefully protected beneath a blanket was a vanilla birthday cake decorated with delicate sugar flowers. The cake was for his daughter Clara. She was turning 8 years old. Before leaving home that morning, Clara had hugged him tightly and said, "Don't be late, Papa." Elias had smiled and touched her nose. "I wouldn't miss my favorite girl's birthday for anything in the world." His wife, Catherine, had laughed. "You better not. She's been talking about this cake for 2 weeks. Elias had promised both of them that he would be home before the stars appeared. Now he urged the horses forward, eager to keep that promise. Then the mountain exploded. A violent tremor shook the earth. The wagon jumped beneath him. A deafening roar filled the tunnel. For a split second, Elias looked upward and saw the ceiling cracking apart. Then, thousands of tons of rock came crashing down. The sound was like 100 thunderstorms happening at once. Wood shattered, stone broke, dust erupted into the air. Everything went black. When Elias opened his eyes, silence surrounded him. For several moments, he couldn't move. His ears rang. His chest hurt. The metallic smell of crushed stone filled the air. Slowly, he pushed himself upright. Pain shot through his ribs. The wagon had been destroyed. Broken beams and splintered boards pinned him inside a small pocket of space. Somehow, he was still alive. "Elias, think." He forced himself to breathe slowly. The air pocket wasn't large, maybe the size of a pantry. Above him lay solid rock. There was no obvious way out. Then he heard something. A weak voice. Is anyone there?" Elias froze. The voice sounded distant and frightened. "I'm here," he shouted. A painful cough followed his words. "Hold on." He searched through the wreckage and found his lantern. By some miracle, it hadn't broken. His hands trembled as he struck a match. The lantern flickered to life. Golden light pushed back the darkness. The sight before him was terrible. A stagecoach sat crushed beneath enormous slabs of granite. Its wheels were shattered. The roof had collapsed inward. Another man was trapped there. Elias recognized him. Silas, a young stagecoach driver who ran the Tucson route. Silas's legs were pinned beneath heavy wooden debris. Dust covered his face. Fear filled his eyes.
"Mr. Hawthorne,"
Silas whispered.
"I thought I was alone."
"You aren't alone." Elias crawled closer, despite the pain. "We're getting out of here." Silas looked around helplessly.
"How?"
Elias didn't have an answer, but he knew panic would only make things worse. The mountain had already taken enough. It would not take their hope. Using a fallen beam as a lever, Elias wedged the wood beneath the wreckage. Then he pushed. The muscles in his back screamed. His ribs felt like they might crack. The beam groaned. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. Sweat rolled down his face. Finally, the debris shifted slightly. "Move!" Elias shouted. Silas pulled himself forward. The opening widened just enough. A second later, he crawled free. Both men collapsed onto the dusty ground, breathing heavily. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply sat together in the darkness, two strangers sharing the same nightmare. Far above them, the rescue effort had already begun. Word of the collapse spread through the valley like wildfire. Catherine Hawthorne arrived at the tunnel entrance before sunset. The sight nearly broke her heart. An entire section of mountain had fallen. Dust still drifted through the air. People crowded around the disaster site. Miners brought picks and shovels. Ranchers arrived with ropes and teams of draft horses. Farmers left their fields and came running. Everyone knew Elias. Everyone respected him. Sheriff Miller studied the collapsed tunnel with a grim expression. "We can't use black powder," he told the crowd. "If we blast this mountain, we'll kill anyone still trapped inside." The crowd fell silent. "So what do we do?" someone asked. The sheriff looked at the mountain. "We dig." And they did. Inside the darkness, time passed slowly. Hours felt like days. The small air pocket grew colder. Elias and Silas checked their supplies. Together they had only one canteen, less than a quarter full. The realization settled heavily between them. Silas stared at the remaining water. "What if they don't find us?" "They'll find us." "You sound sure." Elias forced a smile. "Because I know the people outside." The truth was that fear sat deep inside his chest, but he refused to surrender to it. Eventually, Silas noticed the cedar box. The cake survived? Elias looked down. The box had scratches and dents, but it remained intact. Carefully, he opened it. The vanilla cake was damaged. Several sugar flowers had broken. One side had collapsed. Yet the sweet smell instantly filled the air. For a moment, Elias wasn't trapped underground. For a moment, he was home. He could almost hear Clara. He could almost see Catherine standing in the kitchen. "My daughter turns 8 today," Elias said softly. Silas looked away. "I'm sorry." Elias shook his head. "No, We're going to celebrate." He pulled out his pocket knife. Carefully, he sliced off a small piece, then handed it to Silas. The young man looked surprised. "You should keep it. My Clara would never forgive me if I let a guest go hungry." Silas smiled for the first time since the collapse. Together they ate the cake. The sweetness felt almost magical. It reminded them that somewhere beyond the stone existed sunlight, family, birthdays, and hope. "How do you stay calm?" Silas finally asked. Elias leaned against the rock wall. "I've spent my life building wagons." Silas looked confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I understand how things are built, and I understand people." He paused. "If enough good people are working on a problem outside, eventually they'll reach the inside." Silas nodded slowly. He wanted to believe that. Above them, the entire valley worked without rest. Day became night. Night became morning. Men dug until their hands bled. Women carried away rubble in sacks. The draft horses strained against ropes tied to giant boulders. People who had argued for years now worked side by side. Old grudges disappeared beneath the dust. Everyone focused on one goal: bring the trapped men home. Throughout it all, Catherine remained near the tunnel entrance. She barely slept. She barely ate. Yet she never left. Whenever doubt crept into her heart, she remembered Elias's promise. He never broke his word. He was coming home. The second day brought a miracle. Deep inside the mountain, Elias suddenly heard something. Thump, thump, thump. He sat upright. Silas heard it too. Both men stared at each other. The sound came again. Iron striking stone. Rescuers. Tears filled Silas's eyes. "They're close." Elias smiled. "I told you." Hours later, a tiny opening appeared. A voice echoed through the darkness. "Elias! Silas! Can you hear me?" It was Sheriff Miller. The two trapped men shouted until their throats hurt. Cheers erupted from the other side. The rescuers now knew exactly where they were. The digging intensified. More horses were brought in. Pulley systems were built. Massive rocks slowly shifted aside. Finally, after endless effort, a narrow crack opened. A single beam of Arizona sunlight pierced the darkness. Neither man could look directly at it. The light seemed almost holy. Hands reached through the opening. "Come on!" The rescuers pulled Silas out first. Elias insisted. "The boy goes before me." Silas disappeared into the sunlight. Then the rescuers returned for Elias. As they pulled him upward, he held the cedar box tightly against his chest. When he finally emerged from the mountain, fresh air struck his face. He closed his eyes. The scent of sagebrush filled his lungs. The open sky stretched endlessly above him. For a moment, he simply stood there, alive. Then he heard Catherine. "Elias!" She ran toward him. He opened his arms. She crashed into him and held him tightly. Neither cared about the crowd watching. Neither cared about the dust covering their clothes. All that mattered was that they were together again. Around them, cheers erupted. The entire valley celebrated. They had defeated the mountain. They had brought their people home. Elias looked around at the exhausted faces. Miners, farmers, ranchers, neighbors, friends. Every one of them was covered in gray dust. Every one of them had helped save his life. Emotion filled his throat. Slowly, he opened the cedar box. The cake inside was badly crushed now, almost ruined. Yet it didn't matter. Elias walked toward the sheriff and the rescue crew. "I'm afraid I don't have enough money to repay what you've done," he said. His voice shook with emotion. "But I do have this." He revealed the smashed birthday cake. Laughter spread through the crowd. Tired smiles appeared everywhere. "It seems a shame to waste it." Soon, pieces of cake were being passed around. Miners shared bites with ranchers. Farmers shared bites with deputies. Silas sat beside Elias and accepted another small piece. Under the shadow of the mountain that had nearly killed them, everyone shared that simple meal together. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't beautiful. But to Elias, it was the finest feast he had ever tasted. Because it tasted of kindness. It tasted of friendship. It tasted of second chances. As evening settled across Arizona once more, Elias climbed onto a neighbor's wagon with Catherine beside him. The horses started home. Their bells jingled softly in the cooling air. The mountain faded behind them. Ahead waited Clara. Ahead waited her birthday. Ahead waited life. Elias looked at the sunset painting the clouds in gold, purple, and fire. The cake was gone. The party was late. But he finally understood something important. The greatest gift he could bring his daughter was never the cake. It was the story. The story of how an entire town joined hands, faced impossible odds, and reached into the darkness to bring a father back into the light. And it was a story Clara would remember for the rest of her life. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way till the end. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. It really helps us a lot. If you want to watch more exciting stories like this, don't forget to subscribe our page right now. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is right now? And if this story touched your heart, please send some stars. Every single star gives us huge motivation to keep creating more amazing videos for you. See you in the next story. Take care of you, friends.